Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Bit of a differently timed video to normal in that it's been such a kind of mad spell of press conference that this video is coming after a press conference. So that's good in a way because it means we've got kind of some real latest stuff in terms of updates to discuss and things that Postecoglou said. And we've also got a rather chaotic, crazy game to talk about as well. Yeah, it has been a mad few days. I mean, Wednesday I was at Hotspur Way watching open training and then we had a press conference. You only watch 15 minutes of open training. I don't let you see too much of it. It's kind of more just the hi, we're here before the players will disappear way out of view. And then last night, obviously, the game at Hotspur Way and all of the kind of traffic and transport chaos that came with that. And we'll talk about that as well because it did play a little bit of an impact in certain aspects. So certainly so the Qarabag manager was telling us. And then today, and I actually had my own, not just my own, but everyone stuck on the M25 with me's transport issues today. Because for the first time in covering the club in what we at now, 8 years. It is 8 years. In 8 years, I missed a press conference that I was intending to be at. And I was literally, as it was going on, probably 4 miles down the road from, because set off very early, plenty of time. I was going to get to Hotspur Way a good 45 minutes before the press conference, maybe more it would have been by the time I'd got in. But they shut off the M25. There was unfortunately an accident. I don't really know anything more about that, but they shut off the M25, for those who know the area, between the Waltham Abbey junction and the Cheshunt A10 junction, which is the one you turn off to get to Hotspur Way. And it was shut off for a good hour and a half. So I ended up rocking up at Hotspur Way about 10 minutes after Ange had left the room, much to the enjoyment and hilarity of my fellow reporters, who all absolutely mocked me, quite rightly so. And I ended up, I still helped, I was still transcribing it, but it was weird to kind of turn up just after the event and not be in the room and not ask the questions or some of the questions. But that doesn't mean I can't still talk about it because I've listened to it back as well, so I could get the tone of things as well. I always feel that's really important rather than just seeing the words on a page. But yeah, just weird not to be in there. And it was in a good mood, they told me, and someone said it was because I wasn't there, which was harsh, but maybe true. But yeah, let's dive straight into it. Of course, the main line from the press conference was the injury news. This is exactly what he said today, and I think obviously it's still early days from last night. Fair to say the boys are fairly tired. The ones who put in a shift, apart from Sonny, everybody is okay. And Sonny, I don't think is too bad. He wants to train tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes and make a decision from there. We have another day up our sleeve to give him every chance. So if you don't remember exactly what it was, we'll talk about it a bit more in detail later. But after the third goal, after Son's shot was saved, Solanke put in the follow-up. Son was kind of holding his hamstring. It didn't look too comfortable. Physios came on, they took him off. And this is kind of now what we're seeing, that he is a doubt for the United game, but they're going to see how he kind of holds up if it seems to want to train tomorrow. There was a question then about the option on Son's contract, which we know Spurs are going to take. Of course, they're going to take up the extra year's option. They can do it at any point before, obviously, this summer when it would normally expire. And yeah, the question was, there's an option for an extra year on Son's contract. You always had the final say. So is that an easy decision for you to make? To which Postecoglou said, I don't always have the final say, but certainly I like to think my input is significant on it. But yeah, look, I think it is part of a broader discussion around Sonny, but the way he is performing and leading the club at the moment, I certainly want him to stick around for a while. So yeah, just taken from that, there's a couple of things, obviously. I don't always have the final say is interesting, because I'm pretty sure he has said he has the final say before. Maybe that is more on signings, perhaps. Could be. I mean, technically, I guess he could be saying, I might love a player and want him to be handed a massive new contract, but ultimately it's down to the club to decide whether they do that. I suppose that's the way of looking at it. And of course, the other side of it is that he wants Sonny to stick around for the foreseeable future, which is good news, of course. There's a little bit more coming on Sonny at 10:30 tonight in the embargo part of the press conference. So For anyone new and isn't aware of what the embargo section of the press conference is, so there are two sections to a press conference. First one is the stuff that goes, it's called the live or the broadcast section, which is shown on TV and YouTube, on streaming stuff straight away. We have to wait until that section is finished before we can kind of discuss it, put it out there, put it on social media, put it in live blogs that I run and things like that. Then there is a separate section after that, which is, it's kind of, you can call it the embargoed stuff, the 10:30 stuff, the written stuff, whatever you want to call it. It's a traditional kind of section that was for the newspapers to have something extra and fresh for their newspapers the next morning. Then came along that pesky thing called the internet, so it was decided that, I guess in essence, to try and bury them a little bit, the stories that would go into those would go online at 10:30 the night before, and they would be fresh in terms of print for the papers the next day. 10:30 is kind of burying it for a lot of UK audience, but of course, as we're a global news world nowadays, 10:30, of course, for other places is where some of them may be waking up. It could be in the middle of the day for them, so it's not quite as buried as it used to be. So that's what that section is. And that is why you get an extra little bit, and you'll see me and other journalists put out more quotes from Postecoglou. Sometimes if the game is a couple of days on, that batch of quotes might be saved another day on. It could be, it's normally the night before the game. It doesn't always, I'm just saying that, and in my head I'm thinking it's a Sunday game. It doesn't always work. That sometimes it doesn't go on a Saturday because Sunday newspapers, sorry, it's all very newspapery this, but Sunday newspapers have their own staff, their own things, and they'll often get something different from the club. So sometimes you probably will this weekend maybe see a player interview go out for the Sunday newspapers. Sorry, it's all very, very worky, and it's kind of not particularly that interesting for people that just don't really need to or care about that sort of thing. That was a bit about Sonny stuff. Keep an eye on 10:30 stuff. There's a bit more. There's another question about Vicario. Vicario was there was a nice little moment when Sonny came off. Ben Davies was initially given the armband, and despite other players saying to him, "Go on, you take it," he handed it to Vicario because, as I reported in a previous, I think it was the last video or the one before, that Vicario was officially inducted, as it were, into the leadership group this summer as the fourth member with Sonny, Romero, and Maddison, and so. Postecoglou was asked, are you been proud of how Vicario's been, especially with the criticism that's come of him, since he's arrived? And he said, and it was because he was great last night was a part of the question. So Postecoglou said, yeah, he was, but he's been great since the day he arrived. Criticism is just part of the nature of football these days. We've had a few under the spotlight. I included him in the leadership group this year. I've just seen his growth. He's one of those guys who's really positive. He comes in every day wanting to work. He comes in on his days off wanting to work. He's a great example for everyone and a great human being as well. I thought he could add something to our leadership group. It's great for him to get the armband last night, and I thought he rose to the occasion. He was big for us. He hasn't had to make too many big saves in the first few games for us, but we needed him for a couple last night, and he was great. He was very good, Vicario, last night. But that is something we shall speak about as well in a little bit when we talk about the game. He was asked, what do you see as Archie Gray's best position? He said, I see him in a Tottenham shirt and playing good football. I thought he was great last night. A different challenge for Archie, his first European game, and having to play 10 men with 10 men or within 10 men for the whole game. He had to do a couple of different roles. As I said from the outset, from the moment he's arrived, he's looked like a real mature young man. He's a great focus on the career he wants to have ahead of him. He has had a couple of games at right back for us. Pre-season, he played a few different positions. What I do know is he will be a significant contributor for us. He already has been, and I really was proud of him last night and the way he handled everything. He was excellent as well, Archie Gray, in different aspects, and we're going to talk about that as well. Sorry, this is the weird nature of having a press conference that touches on some of the subjects that I'm going to touch upon when we talk about the game. Then he was asked about Lucas Bergvall, or Bergvall. There's a way of saying it. It's either Bergvall, he kind of pronounces it Bergvall, but technically you can say it almost sounds like Bergvall. It's like Bergvall. That's awful. Lucas Bergvall is how I'm going to pronounce it. Can we expect him to be a strong contributor this season was the question. So he said, Lucas is another one. I think I said before the game we were really keen to expose him to European football last night. Unfortunately, it ended prematurely for him, and understandably, he was disappointed. It doesn't take away from the fact that is how much we trust him. We wanted him to start last night, and he will get plenty of opportunities to play. He's come in as an 18-year-old and not really let his age affect the fact that he wants to make a contribution to the club straight away, and I'm sure he will. Again, there's a little bit more on the Lucas Barival at 10:30 tonight. Of course, this video is going to go out before that, and I don't want to break the embargo because that's wrong and frowned upon. And he was asked about Ten Hag being under pressure. And the reason, I wouldn't normally include this being about another club, but actually I thought it was quite interesting. Within the answer, I think he was kind of referring to himself as well. See what you think. I mean, there's quite some obvious pointers towards that as well. He said, there's always some manager under pressure. I think it must be one of those spinning boards with all our faces on it, and wherever it lands, he cops it for a week or two. I think Eric, in a real tough job, has done really well. He keeps mentioning he's won 2 trophies, and he has, mate. I don't think that's insignificant. People keep telling me that that's what I have to do, but it's obviously not all you have to do, because even when you do that, there's more. There's always more, and I think he's done a great job in a difficult job. At Old Trafford, it's tough there. You look at their record, and irrespective of the managers, it's still a fairly compelling record, and they've got some real quality players. We had a really good game there last year. It was 2-2, a cracking game, and it's one we're going to be ready for. The bits in there obviously are that he got a lot of flack for mentioning about winning stuff in his second season, and he was kind of pointing out, well, Ten Hag is constantly saying about winning those 2 trophies, and also the fact that Postecoglou is constantly told, you need to win a trophy, and clearly that's not the be-all and end-all if it's not the big trophies, I suppose, like the leagues and the European competitions, I suppose. You could also, of course, argue, if you want to counter that at United the expectation is higher than that. Whereas at Spurs, we just want a trophy, please. But yeah, I've always felt this, that I would love to see, if it's Carabao Cup, I'd love to see it with the Carabao Cup. I would love for something tangible, but I'm also fully aware that just the Carabao Cup is not enough. It needs to be part of a big thing that happens at Spurs. I think that's obvious, He was also asked in the press conference whether Brennan Johnson deactivating his Instagram account shows footballers are better off without social media, which might not be the worst idea in the world. He said, look, I don't know if it has made Brennan happier or more comfortable. I think when you switch something off, it is probably because it makes you uncomfortable rather than unhappy, and that's great for him. But that's not the reason for his goals. The reason is, as I said a couple of weeks ago, he works awfully hard at his game. And if you work awfully hard at something and you're passionate about it, eventually you get the rewards. The thing is not to let it affect your work ethic and your focus, and it hasn't. Brennan is in every day wanting to be better. He asks for feedback. He's constantly working on his game and really cares about the club, cares about his teammates, and he wants to be the best he can be. When you have that attitude, eventually the rewards come, and at the moment he's getting the rewards. But I still think there's more to come. I think there's a lot more to come. I say that because I know even now he's looking to improve, looking to get better, and that is what you want to see in young players. He loves Brennan Johnson, and you can see why. I mean, it's the whole criticism thing was so ridiculous because you can see the technique and you can see the ability in Brennan Johnson, but you've also got to understand that he's 22, 23 years old now, I think he is, that there's a lot more to him. There's a lot more learning to do, that decision making and things like that. And, we've seen in the last 3 games, 3 clinical finishes, brilliant finishes. And that's how quickly football changed around. And that's how much confidence plays a part in things as well. And all the while he's learning as he goes on. He's probably is, if we're taking Decky out of the winger kind of thing, he probably, I think he has to be the most informed winger right now. Son's definitely contributing. He's got 4 goal involvements in 5 Premier League games. But I think if you say over the last 3 games, which include cup games, Brennan Johnson, I was going to call him Brandon Austin for some reason. Brennan Johnson has 3 goals in 3 games. And talking of Sonny, he was also asked Postecoglou, who are the options on the left if Sonny is out? And is it fair to assume that Mikey Moore is not ready to start in the Premier League yet? To which he said, no, I wouldn't say that, as in about Mikey. But yeah, we'll see with Sonny. Obviously, with Wilson out, we're kind of limited. And with Richie out, because Richie can play there as well, we are kind of limited. But Timo and Mickey can certainly come into the frame. We've got Decky Kulusevski who can play wide as well. So we've got some options there. But firstly, we'll see how Sonny is. My gut feeling would be that if Sonny does miss out on the game, you'd probably see Kulusevski go onto the right wing. Brennan Johnson goes to the left. Obviously, prefer him on the right, but he can do things on the left. So is contributed there. And then you probably imagine Pat Matasar coming into the midfield because he played pretty well last night. I don't know if you play Madison, Basuma and Bentancur. I would presume, I think you put Sarr in there for mobility. Sarr scored against Man U. Bentancur scored against Man U as well. I was trying to think if Basuma has. I don't think he has for Spurs. Whether he has for Brighton. I feel like he has for Brighton. But yeah, he was also asked about Timo Werner and the difficult night he had against Coventry. And is he experienced enough to get through this and become a key player again? To which he said, yeah, look, again, we've mentioned so far that Vic apparently was getting criticism, Brennan, and now it's Timo's turn. It is part of being a professional footballer. You're always going to get criticism. You're always going to get scrutiny. It's how you react to it. For me, what I want to see is them coming in every day and working hard at their game. If they're getting criticism and not performing and I see their attitude is not great, that is when I intervene because there's only one way to change that. But Timo's a professional. He comes in every day working hard and I have no doubt he can make an impact for us. The best way to do that is to focus on his football and keep doing the right things. So yeah, so that's kind of the main stuff from the press conference. The trouble with so many press conferences is that, you kind of end up covering a lot of the same old ground. And there's also, you do run out to a degree of things to ask about. So yeah, I guess in a way, not being there, I kind of left myself fresh. I'm the Pedro Porro for the next press conference, the Christian Romero, the James Maddison. I've not exerted myself, and I can be fresher when I ask questions on Sunday after the game. Hopefully, I get to the game. Who knows with current transport stuff? I mean, that brings us on quite well to last night. As I said earlier, it wouldn't be Tottenham Hotspur if there wasn't an element of chaos to proceedings. That's just what the club do best. Although, to be fair, look, those before kickoff were completely outside of their control. Most trains in the area were cancelled, very sadly, due to a person being hit by a train on the line between Tottenham Hale and Broxbourne. I should stress, only because I have to from experience, that I haven't seen any mention thus far of someone being killed by being hit by a train. So we have to refer to it as hit by a train. And I know some people right now are thinking, well, how in the world are you going to survive that? My answer to that would be, having spent 5 years covering news before I moved into sport and football, with where I worked, there were a lot of train lines, train crossings, things like that. And so unfortunately, we frequently had stories on such matters, and there were people that did not die. So it may well be that was the case here, but I haven't seen anything so I can say that, and I don't want to say that. At the moment, it's a person being hit by a train. Sorry, that went a little bit dark and deep there, but you kind of, especially when you're reporting things or saying things, you've got to get them right in these circumstances. And without the full facts, that's as much as I can say. So that's the trains. There are obviously issues on the roads with closures. Anyone that was trying to drive there, I think the A10 was closed as well. I ended up having to drive. It was a bit of traffic. It wasn't too bad. I don't know why this has become a traffic video. I apologise for that. But the North Circular wasn't too bad. The A10, however, was a bit of a nightmare for people. Of course, very much keeping that in context with what had happened with the train. The traffic, though, ended up causing the Qarabag team to be stuck on their bus for 2.5 hours trying to cover what is about 12 miles or so from their hotel in Stratford. There were some suggestions that they ditched the coach and were spotted walking up Tottenham High Road. That, from what I understand, I'm speaking to various people today, wasn't the case. Haven't seen any photos or video footage to show that definitely happened. And you would imagine that if Spurs fans saw them, they would instantly be whipping out their phones and taking photos or videos. But from everyone I've kind of spoken to around the game, the suggestion seems to be that it wasn't actually the case, and it's one of those things that ended up spreading a little bit like a rumour. But by all means, if a photo or something pops up, we'll see. But yeah, they weren't happy about it. What's quite interesting, I suppose, in a way, is that the much spoken about hotel, the Blade-like hotel that will eventually be on that south complex behind the stadium, which is going to be open in time for Euro 2028. I wonder if teams will stay there. You would imagine. I don't know if the club will charge them a load to do so. But you do then literally you can walk across. There'll probably be an underground way of getting into the stadium from that as well. It would seem to make sense, wouldn't it? Then you're going to have no issues of that regard with opposition teams getting there. If anything, it might end up being longer for the team to get there, and depending on how they get there, whether they come from the training ground or whether they come separately. Different managers do different things. Some of the managers have said that they got to all meet at the training ground and they travel together to home games. This is, and some of them would allow players just to make their own way to the ground. But yeah, but either way, everything that happened around the game, we had this 35-minute delay to kick off as not just the players but also the fans were trying to make their way to the stadium. The Qarabag boss, Gurbanov, was sat in his press conference. He came in just before Ange. He was unhappy to it. I wouldn't say to a degree that he was saying it was a be-all and end-all and that was everything, but he wasn't happy, and he was saying that they should have had a police escort for their coach to get through the traffic. I'm not sure that's something that's always the way in these certain things. Maybe in big derbies where there's potential of people throwing stuff and it not being a great thing, as we've seen in some of the bigger matches, not just derbies, to be fair. But yeah, there was also a suggestion maybe for the very end of it they did have a police escort, but I don't know. But also, he was complaining about the fact that they got to the ground and they were told, you're playing in 40 minutes, get ready. And obviously, you've got time in there where you've got to get changed, you've got to get ready for the game and everything. So, yeah, it's not ideal. But what I would say is actually Spurs, for me, looked the team more affected in those early stages. They were quite sloppy in some of their stuff and no more so summed up than Radu Dragusin's dreadful 7th-minute moment. First he allowed Mickey van der Ven's pass to kind of go across his body rather than controlling it. I just don't think he had any realisation that Juninho was there, and he ran straight onto it, took the ball. Not the original Juninho, you might remember. But then it was one of those where you kind of have to just accept, oh, well, the player's got away from me because I can't go and bring him down because that's it. That's game over for me and potentially the team. And Dragusin, maybe just a burst of kind of over-enthusiasm to the head, a desire to put things right after making a mistake. And as a 22-year-old, of course, he's a very young player. But it was just, it was a nightmare what happened next. He's clambered all over Juninho, brought him down. And, yeah, there was only going to be one outcome, and that was a red card being flourished. Postecoglou, you could just see, was like, oh, no. He just started shaking his head, turned away from the pitch. Because you can't, as a manager, legislate for that, can you? 7 minutes into your first European game with the club, one of your defenders decides he's not only going to fail to control a ball or choose not to control a ball, but he's going to turn around and bring the man down as he's running through on goal. So he did, to be fair, he did held out his hand for kind of like a handshake / slapping of the hand to Dragusin as he came off. But there was so much more kind of in terms of consequences to what Dragusin did. It wasn't just for him. It kind of affected so many different people at one moment. It's quite an interesting study, really, of how one decision can actually affect so many different people, like a butterfly effect in sorts. So Lucas Bergwijn was the first one, obviously. They had to sacrifice someone. And I think it was probably going to be down between Bergwijn or probably Brennan Johnson were probably the two that were maybe in the potential firing line for that. And obviously, it proved to be the right decision not to take off Brennan Johnson because he scored a goal 5 minutes later. But also, he's the informed player and the senior player, and you probably don't do that in those circumstances. And I did, of course. I think we all felt for Lucas Bergwijn. What was a terrific crowd in the end, despite the troubles in getting there. 51,757 on a Thursday night with hardly any transport working was superb. But, he had to walk off under those lights in front of them all, and he looked gutted. I mean, he tried to do a little clap to the crowd. He kind of composed himself a bit. Sonny came over to him and had a little word in his ear as well. But ultimately, someone had to go. They had to restore the back four. Destiny Udogie comes on. Ben Davies moves into the centre of defence. So someone had to go. But yeah, he looked absolutely gutted. He was sat on the bench. his hood kind of pulled up like so far as I could just see his eyes. And it's one of those where, yeah, they looked a little bit kind of watery, but you can't just say, oh, that's his emotional, he's crying or whatever. I don't think he was. It could be anything. It really could be. It could just be a bit of breeze in his eyes. But more so the fact that he was just like, was quite literally trying to kind of hide and get away from it all, just hide the disappointment of the whole evening for him. But yeah, that wasn't even the only consequence of the moment, though. Of course, the other one was that all of those players that I'm sure Postecoglou was hoping were going to have not an easier night of it, but if they could dominate the game, control the ball, they were going to have to do less running, hopefully, or slightly less, and he would be able to take players off as the game wore on. That would have been the point. But no, with 10 players, suddenly you're going to have to do a lot more work, a lot more effort. He probably would have wanted to take, or definitely would have wanted to take Sonny off reasonably early. Dominic Solanke probably would have come off quite early. You probably would have seen, had Spurs been in a dominant position in the game with 11 players, probably would have seen Mikey Moore and Will Lancashire come on, maybe around the hour mark. They probably would have got a longer go. Obviously, Lancashire didn't come on in the end. Even Van de Ven probably would have come off. Maybe your doggy would have, it could have almost given them a half each. Maybe your doggy came on for the second half and Davies moved into the middle. So just one decision changed all of that as well. Doggy ended up playing, was like almost 85, approaching 90 minutes with added time as well. So he didn't get the rest he needed either, or not wanted, but the club or the coaching staff wanted for him. And of course, we could now have further consequences with what happened to Sonny and his. You could see he wasn't right, because Sonny is always one of the first to congratulate someone if they score, and he couldn't really get it. Went really slowly. Eventually, he was like one of the last to get across to Solanke, so you know something was wrong. And so yeah, it was just a poor moment for so many reasons and so many after effects as well. And it's a shame because Dragusin's decision making is normally really good. I just think the occasion got to him, and of course, as I say though, he's a 22-year-old. That's going to happen with players. They are going to make silly decisions. You know, Doggy we saw last season with the tackle against Chelsea when Spurs were already down to 10 men, and then that's just going to happen. A rush of blood to the head. Postecoglou was asked after the match what he said to both Dragusin and Berval after that early moment of chaos, and he said nothing specifically to them. I mean, it was just a consequence of us starting the game really slowly. It was just not a great start for us. We were really passive with our passing, whether it was a delay to the game or whatever. It's no excuse. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot, and unfortunately, Radu and Lucas paid the ultimate price for it. But as a team, we just didn't start the game in the way we wanted to and the way we needed to, and we made the game challenging for us. The response was great, absolutely, but I'm disappointed we had to be in that position. Archie Gray did a good interview with TNT Sports. He was really good. I've got some little stats and bits talking about Archie Gray. He was like, I've used the expression before, he was an energizer bunny for Tottenham. He just didn't stop moving. After the final whistle, he said to TNT Sports, it was a tough game, especially after the first few minutes. Everybody makes mistakes, and obviously Radu didn't want to do that. We're all here for him, and mistakes happen. It was a tough match. They did well, and especially towards the end, we were pinned back a little bit. I think we could have started a bit better. Even when we had 11 men, we could have moved the ball quicker, but overall, it's a good result to get in the first game at home in the European fixtures. And he was asked about reorganising after the sending off, to which he said, you try to stay calm. Things happen in football and you've just got to be able to get on with it and move on. That's part of football and the challenge. Everybody just took it in their stride. I thought and we helped each other on the pitch, which was the main thing. We had to change a few things, obviously, but overall, I thought we dealt with it well. We can still move the ball quicker and a load of things we can work on, but definitely good to get a result. Archie Gray just speaks so well. Honestly, you would never know he's 18 if you heard his voice. If you look at him, he looks like an 18-year-old, I'd say. But the way he speaks, having interviewed him out in Japan, I think it was, he is just incredibly mature. He's such a great young man. He's a lovely guy and very, like I say, wise beyond his years, and that's reflected in the way he speaks. And just talking about the way Spurs played with 10 men, which he was kind of alluding to there, or certainly not alluding, he was actually saying it. some will point towards Spurs being open with 10 men and continuing to attack rather than shut up shop and catch the opponents on the break, which, we've seen Spurs do in the past or tried to do in the past. And I mean, we saw it obviously at the weekend with Arsenal against Man City. Look, this is a Postecoglou way. It's going to allow chances for the opposition if you've got 10 men, especially. One or two of which Qarabag really could have taken. There was one that flashed across the face of goal and I don't know how their player put it wide. What I would say, because I've seen some criticism of it since last night, every time Spurs have ended a game with 10 men under Postecoglou, they've won it. It's like you can say all you want about leaving them open and everything, but each of those games they've won. And remember, I'm saying finished with 10 men. There was this 3-0 win, 1-1 at Luton last season, and there was a 2-0 win at Forest, although you could argue they'd scored twice before Isbassoon was sent off in the 70th minute. But essentially, that's 3 wins and actually 3 clean sheets as well. So it's one of these things where we can kind of say, they just go crazy. They still attack like a normal team. But it's worked. They've scored, again, I'm adding in the Forest goals, but technically you could say they came before Basuma. But in those goals, they've scored 6 goals and haven't conceded, despite having 10 men. Look, I know everyone was probably saying, what about a Chelsea game? I would say that's a more extreme example because that's with 9 men. They were down to, before the first half even ended. It was before the first half ended, wasn't it? I'm trying to think now. It feels so long ago. And ultimately ended up with 9 men. That's the main thing. And I would say, other than the odd exception, Spurs actually haven't fared particularly well when going down to 10 men in the past. That trying to sit back and hit on the counter. I mean, the ones that spring to mind instantly, Japhet Tanganga at Palace, they just crumbled, didn't they? That was under Nuno, wasn't it? Eric Lamela in the North London derby under Jose, going off as well after scoring the Rabona goal. What I would say, Postecoglou's way gives them a chance. It unsettles the opposition, and thus far it's worked. Look, if you want to counter it, you could say maybe better teams won't find that such a big deal, or a thing that will unsettle them. Obviously, it depends when the red card comes in the game as well. But I can only go on what's happened thus far. And that's 3 games Spurs have finished a game with 10 men, and they've won every single one of them. That's an incredible record, really, with teams with 10 men. But, maybe I'm just seeing it in a different way to some other people. But I think, at 0-0 after 7 minutes to win that game 3-0 with 10 men, I think that's pretty fantastic, to be honest. I don't know. I kind of feel like if you're kind of pointing towards the Qarabag's missed opportunities rather than the fact that where Spurs won 3-0, I just don't know what you want from a game of football. I don't know. And especially if you were there in the crowd. That could have been a ruined experience as a game for fans. But the whole Postecoglou way is, even with 10 men, we're going to make you kind of paying for this ticket and making your way through the transport and traffic issues still worth it. And it was. It was an entertaining game. I'd say there was a little period in the second half, especially where they lost their way a little bit and conceded more chances during that period. But overall, I thought Spurs did so well with 10 men. I thought they really did. And actually on this morning, Spurs tweeted, 10 men and we never stopped playing our football, which you can't help but feels a little nod towards down the road to the London rivals and conceding that late goal against City. But yeah, look, different opposition. I'm not going to compare the two because that's very, very different. But yeah, and I think it brought that first goal because within 5 minutes of Dragusin going off, Pat Matasar and Solanke combined with a bit of really good pressing. Solanke ultimately won the ball back, used his strength to hold off the Qarabag player, played the ball into Brennan Johnson. Brennan Johnson, of course, who's had this great 8 days, scores a lovely goal inside the left-hand post. Again, very similar to his last goal against Brentford as well in that respect. And technically the winner against Coventry went inside the left-hand post as well. So, yeah, I think it just showed you that the ability that we're going to still press. We're going to still work incredibly hard, even though we've got 1 man less, and we're going to get ourselves up the pitch because ultimately the best way to win a match is to score goals. You quite literally have to score a goal or 2 or more to win a game. Postecoglou said afterwards, obviously we want to be a team that tackles whatever challenge we have in a certain way. When you go down to 10 men, invariably at times you can't be as aggressive or keep the ball as much or play as fluently. But for the most part, the intent was there. The first goal comes from us pressing. We were pressing with 10 men and we win the ball high up, which is what we wanted to do. And we ended up scoring a goal from it. I think for the most part, the boys showed that intent. That's the kind of team we want to be, and whatever challenge we have before us is to tackle it in that way. I think the first half, if I remember looking, I think the Spurs were still around 74% possession, even though they had 10 men. Second half, that changed. Qarabag got a lot more, and I think over the course of the entire game, I think it ended up that Spurs had slightly less, maybe 48%, slightly less passes. But that is understandable, especially as some of those players are going to tire as well. But yeah, overall though, it's another win. It's a 3-0 win. It's a clean sheet with 10 men. And it was another narrative-busting match. I love narrative-busting matches. I love them. I love it when, people being either unnecessarily unkind to people or doubting people instantly gets like chucked out of the way kind of thing. I don't know what that noise was. It was me kind of chopping it up, I think, and chucking it out of the way with like a knife or something. But yeah, Brennan Johnson continuing to silence his doubters. Solanke back-to-back goals as well to hush some of the very premature worries that we had about him. I thought he was very good again, especially with 10 men and having to be a focal point. He's got this high-pressing, energetic style. Like I say, the focal point play as well. But he's also got this poaching ability as well. Don't forget the 2 goals that he scored have both come from following up shots and being in the right position at the right time. That's what the top strikers do. He's just a great fit for the Spurs system, and I think he's just only at the kind of the embryonic stage of being part of this system as well. He still can get fitter and sharper. He's going to understand the movement of his fellow attackers. His service into him still isn't great. I wouldn't say he had a load of chances either last night. Of course, with 10 minutes, it's not going to be as many, but yeah, I still feel like there's a lot more to come from him as well. And I like his link up with Brennan Johnson seems to be developing as well, and Sonny as well to a degree. I think maybe slightly more so with Brennan Johnson. But yeah, it will come with all of the players. And Postecoglou was speaking about, he was asked about Brennan Johnson. Brennan Johnson's been asked, I think, in every press conference, of course, after what happened in the last week or so. He said, I thought, again, Brennan was really important for us, particularly today going down to 10 men pretty early. We're going to need some attacking outlet. And I thought he, Dom and Sonny provided that. And obviously we needed a goal. I thought it was a good first goal for us because we were only with 10 men, but we still pressed and forced a mistake. And Brennan's been good at taking up those positions, and him and Dom have a good little sort of relationship there in terms of working off each other. And he took his goal well. As you said, that's 3 in 3 games for him, and long may it continue. So yeah, 3 in 3 for him. Solanke, 2 goals, back-to-back games, and of course he got a goal and an assist yesterday. So yeah, really good performance from him. In terms of other performances that were pretty decent, Mickey van der Ven, very good again, fine form, just mopped up everything like he does behind the back line. I thought Doggy played pretty well, especially early on. First half when he came on, he made some really important interceptions in the first 15, 20 minutes after he came on. I still feel like he's a player finding his way back to his very best and sharpness. I don't think he's quite there yet. But I thought he did fine. Ben Davies had a couple of sticky moments in possession. There was one where Vicario had to bail him out a bit. But that aside, I thought he did a lot. It was a very busy presence. And actually, you've heard me refer to them before. Who Scored? It's like a stats website. They do player ratings that are purely based on the stats and the data from games. They had Ben Davies as the highest rating defender on the night. 7.44. Because he made 1 tackle, 1 interception, and 6 clearances. And interesting, Archie Gray was their second highest mark of the back line with 7.20, 2 tackles, 2 clearances. He blocked 1 shot, and he played 2 key passes in the opposition half. I thought he had a really good game. I think you could point to the fact that sometimes Qarabag got down that side, but you've also got to be very aware that he was having to do this dual role as trying to still play the inverted fullback role and getting high on the pitch. He went on some really lovely dribbles as well. But also, because they had a man less, absolutely have to bust in a gut to try and get back as well. So there were going to be times when naturally he was going to get exposed behind him because he was on his own at times. And there weren't enough men to kind of cover everything. But I thought it was really good. You just see so many glimpses of the play he's going to become as well. I'm so desperate to see him in the midfield at some point. I just feel like if we see him, it's a little bit like, not quite comparing the two at all, because they're very, very different players at very different stages of their career as well. But you remember when Luka Modric, like Harry Redknapp to begin with, was playing almost out wide. And I know this is a bit different from Gray, because Gray has played as a right back for a whole season almost for Leeds, or certainly a big chunk of it. But Modric, he was playing on the left, maybe because he didn't trust him in the middle. And then there was a game, I think it was against Stoke. It was like the ultimate test of a central midfielder. And I think due to injuries or something, I can't remember the reasoning now, he had to put Modric in the middle, and Modric just ran the game. Nobody could get near him. And I kind of feel like with Archie Gray, if he gets a chance in a game, it doesn't have to be the biggest game, just kind of a, perhaps even a home game in the Premier League or something, I'd love to see him there in the centre, probably the number 6 role. And I just think you're suddenly going to see what a star this young man's going to become. He's absolutely fine at right back, and I think he will get better and better there, and it will be a very viable option for him in the future. But he's going to be a midfielder, and he's going to be a brilliant one. When you see him, there were a few dribbles he went on last night where the whole crowd were like, you could see the crowd like, whoa, that's pretty decent. There's sometimes, and I hate to kind of distinguish between being in the stadium and being at home, but I do feel that sometimes what you see and the way you see it and the angles you see it, sometimes off the ball stuff as well, you don't see as much. For example, Solanke. I think anyone that was probably at the game last night and saw Solanke inside the stadium, you could see what he was doing, the work rate off the ball, how much he does when the camera is nowhere near him. Is just like, he makes so many runs. He was knackered in the last probably 10 minutes or so before he eventually came off. But that's because of the work rate. When he is able to really last 90 minutes at full pace, it's just going to be remarkable. And yeah, with Archie Gray, you can see the fitness base is there. He's a great kind of willing runner, but the ability on the ball and he makes quite a lot of tactically very clever decisions as well for someone so young. But yeah, just watching him embark on his dribbles and the way his mind is like a step ahead, sometimes the opposition, or 2 steps. And I think as he gets older and gets even more experience, and hopefully they use him in midfield roles, we'll see the player that like dominated Chelsea in the FA Cup and things like that. It's in that position. Yeah, Postecoglou called him outstanding after the game. I think he called him great, didn't he, in the one today? Archie Gray loves Postecoglou as well. He did an interview for TNT afterwards, and he said, in that same interview, he said, "I'm really grateful to have the manager we've got. I'm a big fan of him. I'm grateful to have him here and to learn so much off him. It's a big opportunity for me." To hear stuff like that from him, it was because Postecoglou was asked about trusting the young players. He said, "It makes you trust yourself even more and have more confidence to go out there and be fearless. That's what he wants from us, and hopefully we can go out and do that every game we're trusted to be in." My thoughts on Archie Gray. I think him and Lucas Berval and, someone Mikey Moore coming along as well, and hopefully Will Lancashire, that little base, and Wilson Odebear's only a teenager as well. That group of teenagers is just going to be incredible, I think, going forward for Spurs over the years ahead. Talking of Wilson Odebear, I don't know if you've seen it, but the players picked up their copies of VAFC, the game, and got to see each other's cards on there and their ratings and everything, and poor old Wilson. I don't think you actually ended up properly being able to see it, but I'm guessing his overall number was not great because they were all taking a mickey out of him. It's always fun to see those and how people are always kind of disgusted at what they've been rated as. Like, even you see young Mikey Moore picked up his, and he felt it was a bit generous, the pace, but he said his dribbling wasn't high enough and stuff like that. It's always, and I think that was his first one. I think that was his first. Obviously, it used to be called FIFA, but EAFC card. So very cool moment for him as well. So I'm sure as a kid he probably plays it all the time. That was a weird thing as well. We were wondering yesterday because he's only 17 years old, and we were wondering, does it get to a point where, because of how old he is he allowed to play past a certain time? And I know it sounds ridiculous, but we were pretty sure there was something about Yamin Lamal where he wasn't able to play, or the suggestion that maybe he wasn't able to play an extra time. Was it the Euros? It might have even been at the Euros. I can't remember now. I wonder whether because he's 17 it's slightly different. But yeah, we were wondering that. Like, oh, at what point does it get to kick off and he's not allowed to play a certain amount of minutes or past a certain time? I don't know. We could have just been making it up, but I feel like that used to be a thing. But yeah, so who else? Vicario. Yes, I was going to mention Vicario. So Postecoglou picking him ahead of the game, when you saw that team lineup, you could quite rightly say, I think, well, if you pick Vicario and you haven't even picked Fraser Forster, why is Jed Spence not in the squad? You know, surely you were going to play Fraser Forster. Was that not the point of picking him? I get that. However, at the end of the game, you're probably thinking, thank goodness Vicario was playing. And you could also still argue the fact that if he was going to play, then Spence could have been in the squad. But he was so important yesterday. He was excellent. String of saves. Just really confident kind of handling of everything. And the one where I said earlier, he rushed out to bail out Davies. That could have easily been another either handling the ball. It could have brought down the man. Spurs could have gone down to 9 men potentially, I think, from the position he was in. But he absolutely nailed the sliding challenge perfectly. He'd anticipated it to the absolute perfect degree. And yeah, he made a terrific full-length save to deny Elvin. Sorry for the pronunciation here. Elvin Jafaguliev. I think I've got that right. I think it is that, Jafaguliev. His lovely curling shot from outside the box, and Vicario just pulled off this worldy of a save. And weirdly, even though he didn't save Taral Baryamov's penalty because it hit the bar and over, if you watched it before, Vicario is jumping up and banging the exact part of kind of the bar, or certainly underneath it, where the penalty hit and went over. Maybe it was almost like a kind of suggesting that that's what would happen, putting it out there into the world. Yeah, and of course we had that nice moment again where he got the captaincy for the final, was that 15 minutes or so, maybe less. And he posted on Instagram after the game, a day that I will not forget. The first one as captain, leading this great club at home in a European Cup, and more importantly, getting the 3 points. Proud. This one is for those fans that are always by our side, no matter what. So yeah, good performance from Vicario, which is a good confidence boost, of course, going to Old Trafford at the weekend. I thought Pat Matasar had a quiet first half, wasn't so great. I thought second half he was really good. His movement was much better. Of course, scored a very good second goal as well for Spurs. His first European goal for the club. Probably his first European goal at all, I would imagine. Set piece goal as well. Mark that down because we're going to forget about it when we start moaning about not scoring from set pieces. Kulusevski corner, goalkeeper flaps at it, pushes it on. Pat Matasar volleys it back in and it goes in off the defender. And actually, Pat Matasar played a really important moment. It kind of had an important contribution for the third goal as well. Lovely touch and taking the ball down. Found Kulusevski. Kulusevski found Son. Son shot. Solanke pokes it into the empty net. So I thought Sarr did well. Kulusevski was decent as well when he came on the second half. I understood him coming on for Brennan Johnson. It not only gives Brennan Johnson a little bit of a rest ahead of the Old Trafford game, but also Kulusevski was always going to play deeper, and it gave Spurs a little bit more in midfield until, funnily enough, that little 20-minute spell when they fell away a bit. Yves Bissouma, I thought he was quite mixed. I've seen some people raving about him, some people saying he was awful. I feel somewhere in the middle. I felt he had some really good moments, but I also felt it was quite sloppy. And in the good moments, 3 interceptions, 3 clearances, 1 tackle. But also, some moments where he didn't use the ball particularly well and got caught out of position a couple of times as well. Penalty, I think it was just about a penalty because he does catch him first and the guy hasn't quite gone down, and then the second attempt to get the ball, he does get the ball cleanly, but I think the first moment he's already kicked the guy in the back of the leg, so I didn't have too much kind of disagreement with it, although clearly Bissouma did. But yeah, so there's a mixed display from him. I don't know whether he'll start. We'll see. I think it'll be, if Sonny's out, it'll be between him and Sarr for that extra spot in midfield alongside Bentancur and Maddison. And I would probably go with Sarr right now on his performance last night. Mikey Moore did get onto the pitch, had the crowd singing his name as one of their own, which was lovely. Played the final probably 10 minutes included added time. Came on for Solanke, if I remember correctly. And yeah, he didn't touch the ball too much. There was one little run, I think. Came over to the right at one point as well, and just little final ball moments that weren't quite right. But great experience for him. His first European game. He's only 17 years old, which is ridiculous. So that was good for him. And yeah, the Dragusin red card will have more consequences going forward, because not only will he, of course, miss the game in Budapest next week, but you're going to have a player, probably a defender, playing 3 games in the next week. Maybe Christian Romero, because Christian Romero's had this Thursday night off, so he should be fresher than most. Obviously, he was, if you're not aware, suspended last night because of the red card against Milan 2 seasons ago, because it carries over. I think it's after 2 years red cards expire, or certainly yellow cards. It was 2 yellow cards and a red card. But either way, it was suspended. Dragusin should only miss the 1 game, I think, because it was just a normal red card rather than like a violent conduct or anything like that. So, so that's him out from next week. There will be players fresh for United, though. It's not like it's all kind of doom and gloom and it causes a nightmare. You're going to have Romero, you're going to have Maddison, you have Pedro Porro. Bentancur, Kulusevski, second half subs probably shouldn't be too tired. Brennan Johnson only played the first half, shouldn't be too bad. But of course, all eyes are going to be on Sonny, really. How he comes through tomorrow's session, and whether he'll be available at the weekend, because you don't want to use him if there's any kind of concern about making it worse. Like I said, there's a little bit more on Sonny in the 10:30 stuff, which is worth a look. And look, Spurs going to the game now at Old Trafford off the back of 3 wins in a row, 3 wins in 8 days. So if anyone should have confidence, it's Spurs right now. They're in after a little bit of a sticky period in terms of results. They've got 3 in a row now, 3 wins in a row, and that has to help the way they go in and they're feeling about stuff. Obviously, not been quite as plain sailing for United, but they're always going to be a threat, and of course at home as well with the crowd behind them, it's going to be an awkward atmosphere. Last season, obviously, the 2-2 game Spurs played pretty well. And like I say, Bentancur played very, very well that day. So hopefully he can channel a bit of that again. But yeah, there's a few players that are in a bit of a run now. They're in a bit of form. And hopefully they take that into this game, because you know what the doubters are like. Doubters will say, these are 3 teams you should have beaten anyway. They'll say, you've got to go and do it at a place that counts. So if you go to Old Trafford and win, it's a place that counts. Although they'd probably say, it's a rubbish United anyway. Yeah, so you kind of can't win, can you? But ultimately, that's all they do have to do, is go there, put in a positive performance, come away with a positive result, because everyone is going to see and be watching how they do on a bigger stage. That's what they're going to be looking for. And hopefully Tottenham do it. Like I say, I am heading up there to Old Trafford. Hopefully I don't have any more transport issues, because pretty sure I'm on the last train back, so I really can't miss that on Sunday. Otherwise I'm going to have some issues. Which means there's so going to be issues now. Now I've spoken about it, I'm kind of like manifesting it. Oh no, it's going to happen. So yeah, I think that's everything we can kind of probably talk about in terms of Spurs and the game and the press conference. Like I say, keep an eye out if you're watching this before 10:30. There's a little bit more coming at 10:30. Some little kind of bits and pieces, and yeah. And as I don't think I did it in the last video, a little kind of plug for the marathon stuff and the fundraising, which is just amazing what you guys and girls and everyone has been so generous. We're approaching £17,000 now for cancer research, which is just incredible. I think I'm about 16 and a half at the moment, but people have been brilliant. So, as I said before, I don't plug stuff, I don't promote stuff, I don't promote myself, I don't ask for likes, subscriptions, anything like that. Probably not even called subscription, it's subscribers. But for something like this, I am going to mention it. Probably every other video, I think, is the way to do it. And I'll pop the the link underneath in the comments just for anyone that does want to contribute towards it, because it genuinely does. You know, we talk about Brennan Johnson getting support and confidence, and in no way am I comparing myself to someone like that, like an elite athlete. But it has given me a massive boost in my like training runs and everything. They're getting quicker and quicker, despite the fact that I have been plagued a little bit by the Spurs hamstring curse. But they are getting faster, and it is because a little bit of pressure. You know, when you've had that much money put towards you, you kind of like, I've got to do this. I've really got to make it round as well. I'm not going to hopefully not die or anything like that, and not fail to get there. But yeah, it puts on the pressure, but it also is a really good kick up the backside and makes you realise you're doing something that hopefully will bring a lot of money to a very good cause. So yeah, thank you massively for all of that. It's very much appreciated. Right, time to head off. Hopefully you'll enjoy a nice Saturday and get to just relax and don't worry about what happens with Spurs. And on Sunday we have an even better weekend day to finish the weekend, and a really positive result would be excellent to keep this momentum going. Right, time to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.